Good to talk to you, Chad.
Let me start with the tragedy that took place in Jacksonville. This is what Sheriff Waters, how he described the incident last night.
This shooting was racially motivated, and he hated black people. He wanted to kill. He targeted a certain group of people, and that's black people. That's what he said he wanted to kill, and that's very clear. And I don't know that the targets were specific, but I know that any member of that race at that time was in danger.
Both the FBI and DHS in the last 2 years have said that racially motivated violent extremism is on the rise. This is clearly part of that. What would a President Ramaswamy want the Justice Department to do about this racially motivated violence that we're seeing on the rise?
I think that every criminal deserves to be punished to the fullest extent of the law, especially when they're carrying out premeditated crimes like this one. This is a heinous crime. My heart goes out to the families who were affected by this. It is tragic, and this should not be happening in the United States of America. I think the fact of the matter is, Chuck, it is really just a symptom of a deeper, new form of national division that we have created. And I think one of my top jobs as the next U.S. president is really to lead with a national tone of character that reminds us of how we are all united across our diverse attributes. I think part of the problem is we have obsessed so much over racial and other genetic differences that we have forgotten all of the ways we're really the same as a country. And I do think we need a leader and in the White House developing that national character for this country again. We also do have a mental health epidemic across this country, Chuck, that really is reflective of a hunger for purpose and meaning. We need to fill that void, address the mental health epidemic, but this is a tragedy and deserves to be called out as heinous. That's exactly what it was.
Why do you think there are more race-based violent crimes on the right than on the left? Why is this a lot more pervasive on the right?
Well, the fact of the matter is, I think that there's a lot more violence that's also pervasive in parts of the country that supposedly are left-wing voter bases. So I don't think this is a left versus right issue, and I don't think we should try to politicize this through partisan goggles either, Chuck, especially in the wake of a tragedy like this one. The fact is there are more black men dying on the south side of Chicago.
Do you ignore the elements that allowed this manifesto to spread online, and that what we're, it does feel as if social media connects some of these hateful ideologies?
Well, the fact of the matter is I do think we have two standards that we're even applying if we're having a conversation about manifestos. We still have not yet even seen the manifesto of that transgender shooter in Nashville of a Christian school, and yet here we're focusing on the motive. So if we want to look at this through a politicized lens, let's look at what the political media and the political establishment is doing differentially in how they analyze different crimes and then create a new narrative around it. The fact is, what I said in the Nashville shooter case, I will say here. Any killing, any mass killing is heinous. We need to get to the root cause of the mental health epidemic, address that. We need leadership that sets the right tone in this country. But if we are going to talk about manifestos and politicization, Chuck, I think it is incomplete not to look at the absence of releasing that Nashville shooter manifesto even as of today. That's why I personally traveled to Nashville to call for it. And that, I think, is the best evidence of real politicization in terms of what the public sees and what the public doesn't. I want to apply one standard for everybody. I don't want to look at this through partisan goggles. I want to look at this through one standard of the rule of law for everybody.
You believe racism is a mental health issue?
Well, I do believe that racism in many cases is manufactured in a way that creates more racism in this country. I cannot think of a greater way, Chuck, of driving racism in this country than to take something else away from someone based on the color of their skin. And so is there existing racism in the United States? Of course there is. But those last burning embers of racism, the last thing I want to do is throw kerosene on it. And yet that's exactly what I believe the modern culture is doing by creating race-based quota systems that deny people access to goods or services based on the color of their skin. The right answer to stop discrimination on the basis of race, as John Roberts said it, is to stop discriminating on the basis of race. And I am genuinely worried that we're seeing a new wave of anti-black and anti-Hispanic racism as a consequence of the so-called anti-racist movements.
Your argument comes across as blaming those that are trying to create equality for the rise in racism.
Well, the fact is, Chuck, I don't want to be playing a blame game. I want to be going towards a solution. And I am genuinely worried that those who earnestly espouse the view, I'm going to quote Ibram Kendi from his book directly, I'm not putting words in anybody's mouth, says the right answer to past discrimination is present discrimination. The right answer to present discrimination is future discrimination. I believe the people who hold that view are earnest about it, but I think they're wrong. And I think that that's actually creating more discrimination and more division in our country. And I think the right answer is actually to restore colorblind equality, colorblind meritocracy, embrace what unites us across our diversity instead of celebrating our skin-deep diverse attributes. That's how I think we reunite this country, Chuck. And it's not blaming anybody else for having a different point of view, but I do think that as a leader, it's my job to articulate exactly how we will unite this country. And that's exactly how I'm going to do it.
Let me move to the debate. And a lot of people are asking this question. If you believe Donald Trump is the greatest president of the 21st century, he's running. Why are you running against him? Why do you think his second term won't be as good as his first?
Well, look, I did say he's the best president of the 21st century. From George Bush to Barack Obama to Joe Biden to Donald Trump, I think it's not even close. Who was the best of those presidents? In my book, I judge by results. That being said, I believe I can take the America First agenda even further than Donald Trump did. I think I will be more effective in uniting this country in the process. Look at the way we're running this campaign. I'm not leaving any state behind, any city behind, no American left behind, from the south side of Chicago to Kensington, to places where traditional Republicans don't go. I think I am best positioned to deliver a landslide election, a multi-ethnic working class majority. And I do think that a landslide is what we need in this country, not another 50.1 election. And I'm the only candidate in this race who can actually deliver that.
Look, a Politico neophyte outsider became president and couldn't get a lot of the things done that he wanted to get done in Donald Trump. Why do you think somebody with less experience than Donald Trump had is somehow going to make the federal government function in a way that you're outlining?
So I think there's three things I would say. The first is we have that experience to learn from. I want to build on the foundation that Trump laid. Frankly, I will invite him as an advisor and a mentor. I don't want to relearn the same lessons. I want to pick up where he left off in taking on the administrative state. The second thing, Chuck, is I do think it needs to be an outsider to take on that administrative state, but I also think it needs to be an outsider who has a deep first personal understanding of the laws and constitution of this country. I think Trump was in many cases duped by his managerial advisors, for example, who said that you can't fire employees in the federal government due to civil service protections. Read the law. Turns out those civil service protections only apply to individual firings, not to mass layoffs. Mass layoffs are absolutely what I will bring to the D.C. bureaucracy. And I think the fact that I am from a different generation, Chuck, will be an asset. I'm able to reach young Americans. I'm able to reach people who haven't traditionally been brought into the mold of Republican politics. I don't even talk about Republicans and Democrats. And so I think I will be able to build a greater moral mandate across generations that helps unite Americans around the America First agenda rather than making it a strictly partisan affair.
Let me bring up a couple questions you didn't get a chance to answer at the debate. Most of the candidates on stage Wednesday night said Mike Pence did the right thing on January 6th. Do you agree?
I would have done it very differently. I think that there was a historic opportunity that he missed to reunite this country in that window. What I would have said is this is a moment for a true national consensus where there's two elements of what's required for a functioning democracy in America. One is secure elections, and the second is a peaceful transfer of power. When those things come into conflict, that's an opportunity for heroism. Here's what I would have said. We need single-day voting on Election Day. We need paper ballots, and we need government-issued ID matching the voter file. And if we achieve that, then we have achieved victory, and we should not have any further complaint about election integrity.
So what would,
I would
what
have
you have
driven
done
it through the Senate.
So what would you have done with Mike Pence? You would have not certified the election?
So in my capacity as president of the Senate, I would have led through that level of reform. Then on that condition, certified the election results, served it up to the president, President Trump, then to sign that into law, and on January 7th, declared the re-election campaign pursuant to a free and fair election. I think that was a missed opportunity, but that's the kind of spirit we're going to need to unite this country rather than sweeping those concerns under the rug.
11 months ago, well, in your book, which wasn't written that long ago, You wrote, the fact that all of our governmental institutions so unanimously found no evidence of significant fraud is telling. Furthermore, I've talked to many Republicans at all levels of government, and not one has ever presented convincing evidence that the 2020 election was stolen from President Trump. Very few have seriously tried. I don't believe that most Republican politicians actually think the election was stolen. So you went from there,
let me address
and
this.
11 months later, your views have changed on January 6th. Again, this book was written September of 2022.
Chuck, I'm happy to address that if you're interested.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and read exactly that chapter in the book. I drew a sharp distinction between what I did see as the interference in the election that mattered, which was interference by big tech. I'm data-driven. There's hard data showing that many voters, many independent voters, would have changed their result enough to influence the outcome of the election if they had been exposed to what we now know to be the truth about the Hunter Biden laptop story. By contrast, I've also been clear. I have not yet seen evidence that there was ballot fraud of a scale that would have changed that result. I'm just responding to data on both fronts. But the fact of the matter is, if we're looking at reuniting this country, there are serious concerns on both sides, but especially on the right, about the concern of elections and election interference and ballot fraud, but also big tech interference. And there's a very clear result and way we can address that. I've offered a clear consensus that everybody can get behind. It is practical. And if people really think that debating this issue is a threat to our democracy, that should be an easy consensus to be able to rally around. And that's how I'll lead as president.
First of all, you never talked about the tech stuff in your book. This is a new thing. It is
that's false, Chuck.
You have not talked about this Hunter Biden
in Nation of Victims
aspect of it. We were looking
Chuck,
for it.
I think you have not. I think you have not read Nation. I think you have not read Nation of Victims. Literally read the book. There was about 20 pages of content devoted to this, and I also bring it up in
You didn't write about
Woke
election fraud that way.
It's fine,
but
you don't have an obligation to read my book. But if you do, quote it correctly.
We have been, and let me quote it again. You're referring to Republicans. We use stolen election theories as a backdoor to embracing our own victim identity path, pursuing an easy path to power. Throughout this entire book, you mock the entire January 6th aspect. You absolutely criticize Donald Trump for being a sore loser. You write about it in a way of making your point that we've become a nation of victims. And right now on TV, you're doing the exact opposite.
I'm not. Chuck, actually want to be very clear. I preached to conservative audiences I was in Iowa over the last 2 days, and what do I tell them? We're not going to be victims. We're going to be victorious. Whether I'm talking to the left or the right, I say the same thing. I've also been very clear, Chuck, and I want to be clear today, that I would have made very different judgments than Donald Trump did that day and on many of the matters in his path out of office. But there's a difference between a bad judgment and a crime. And what I've been clear about is when we criminalize those bad judgments, that's an abuse of the justice system. It undermines trust not only in our elections, but in our justice system. We have to be able to draw those distinctions. And I do think, Chuck, it's going to take that kind of leader who can actually preach truth to both tribes in this country to reunite this country. So did Donald Trump make all the right judgments? No, I said so then, I say so now. Was that illegal and should we criminalize it? Absolutely not. But I want to lead this nation forward. That is my goal, not to look in the rearview mirror. And in order to do that, I think on the election integrity issue, we have an opportunity to put this debate behind us by single-day voting on Election Day as a national holiday with paper ballots and government-issued ID. This should not be controversial. And if that helps reunite this country, as I believe it will, that's exactly how I must lead as president, and that's my commitment.
All right, again, from your book, No One Likes a Sore Loser. That's one of the worst victimhood complexes of all. Are you referring to Donald Trump?
I referred in that chapter both to Stacey Abrams and to Donald Trump. And I think that the answer is we need leaders who ultimately stand for victory over victimhood. We did have a victimhood culture that started on the left in this country, the oppression hierarchy. My worry, Chuck, is that that can spread to the right. And the way that this so-called culture war will end is not with a bang, but with a whimper, where each side imitates the methods of the other. That related even to some of our earlier conversation on seeing each other based on the color of our skin. I think that is deeply divisive. What we need in this country is to revive the shared ideals that unite all of us as Americans. The pursuit of excellence, meritocracy, free speech, the rule of law. I genuinely believe, Chuck, that most Americans, regardless of black or white, red or blue, share these ideals in common. And that's what I'm reviving.
I understand that. But again, let me go back to quoting you. the Republican Party seems to be moving towards the position that any races it wins are legitimate and any it loses were stolen. It's just the preferred conservative brand of victimhood, a knee-jerk kind of sore losing more common to playground than great republics. You seem to, at the time you wrote your book, believe this was potentially damaging to the rule of law. This was not a way to have a democracy thrive. And you're now speaking in a way that gives essentially a permission slip to election deniers to believe there's some truth to something that you yourself have yet to find evidence of.
Chuck, I stand by everything I said. That was a book where 11 of the 12 chapters were dedicated to a lot of left-wing victimhood in this country, but it would have been incomplete for me not to call out my own tribe. And my point is, I don't want to see this in terms of red versus blue. We've created an incentive structure in this country, whoever you are, whatever your skin color, increasingly whatever your political affiliation, to see yourself as a victim. I refuse to see myself as a victim. Hardship is not the same thing as victimhood. We are going through hardship as a country right now, including many conservatives. Hardship is sometimes not a choice. Victimhood is a choice. And so whoever the American is that I'm talking to, I say we do not choose victimhood. We choose victory. That is who we are. And I think we can be stronger on the other side of it. So, Chuck, this isn't some game of gotcha. I stand by everything I've written over the last 3 years in the books that I have, except for a few areas on facts where, as the new facts have come up, I've changed my mind. But in the core theses, I'm in the exact place I am as when I wrote those books. But the point of the matter is, I'm not in this race to lead a political party. I am in this race to lead a nation. I'm using the Republican Party as a vehicle to advance an America First agenda that I think many Americans, most Americans can rally behind. That's what we're going to need.
One thing I want to clear up, I know you've only voted in 2 presidential elections. Where did you vote in 2020, and how did you vote?
I voted in Ohio, and during the coronavirus pandemic, I voted by mail. That's exactly how I voted. And you know what? And the fact of the matter is, I think we should have one standard for everybody. But for me, for much of my 20s, I was disaffected from politics. The fact of the matter is, I understand why young people are disaffected. I was uninspired by John Kerry and George Bush. I voted Libertarian that year, or by John McCain and Barack Obama, or Mitt Romney or Barack Obama. So I don't make any bones about that. I actually talk about it in my speeches.
And you're also uninspired by Donald Trump in 2016, right?
I was skeptical of Donald Trump in 2016. That is accurate, because I had grown up in a generation where I felt like we had been lied to, from weapons of mass destruction in Iraq to the 2008 financial bailouts. Those are Republican examples, to Democrat examples of the Russia collusion hoax. So I was deeply skeptical, but I judged based on results, and I voted for him with confidence in 2020.
Vivek Ramaswamy, like I said, you became the center of the debate. We will be following your campaign as it goes on. Be safe on the trail, and thanks for coming on and sharing your views.